The moment she stepped out of her room wearing that dress, I forgot how to breathe. Not because it was revealing. It wasn't. Not because she was trying to get my attention. At least, I didn't think she was. It was simply the first time I had ever looked at my roommate and realized that somewhere between shared grocery lists, late-night arguments over the thermostat, and quiet cups of coffee, she had become the person my heart had been waiting for. She stood in the hallway beneath the warm yellow light, holding one hand against the doorframe while the other nervously smoothed the fabric of her new blue dress. She looked at me and asked how it looked. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I stared a second too long. Maybe two. She noticed immediately. A tiny smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, and she teasingly asked if I wanted a better look. I laughed awkwardly and looked away, pretending to be fascinated by the television. But something had changed. For the first time, neither of us could pretend we hadn't noticed what had been growing quietly between us. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, second chances, and unexpected love can change people's lives, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who might need a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories. My name is Daniel, and at 29, I had convinced myself that love was something I simply wasn't good at. My last relationship had ended badly after years of trying to save something that had already fallen apart. I had walked away carrying more disappointment than anger, and when I moved into the small apartment on the third floor of an old brick building, I made myself a promise: no complicated relationships, no emotional risks, and definitely nothing romantic with my roommate. Her name was Emma. We met through a mutual friend after my previous roommate moved across the country. Emma was 28, worked at a small community arts center, and had the strange ability to make even ordinary things feel meaningful. She kept flowers in old glass jars, wrote grocery lists on colorful scraps of paper, and played soft music whenever she cooked. She laughed loudly when something genuinely amused her, but when she was hurting, she became almost impossibly quiet. At first, we were simply two people sharing rent. Then we became friends. We started eating dinner together because cooking for one person felt pointless. We watched old movies on Friday nights. When I came home exhausted from work, she sometimes left a cup of tea outside my bedroom door without saying anything. When she had a difficult day, I learned not to ask questions immediately. I would just sit beside her on the balcony until she was ready to talk. Somewhere along the way, she became part of my definition of home. That frightened me. I knew how easily comfort could become attachment. I knew how quickly attachment could become something impossible to control. So whenever I caught myself watching her smile from across the kitchen, I reminded myself that she was my roommate. Whenever she fell asleep on the couch beside me during a movie, I quietly moved the blanket over her shoulders and told myself it meant nothing. Then came the dress. She had bought it for an important evening at the arts center. They were hosting a fundraiser, and Emma had spent weeks preparing for it. She had been nervous because someone she admired from the organization was going to be there, and she wanted to make a good impression. That evening, when she appeared in the hallway, I realized something painful. I wasn't afraid of losing my roommate. I was afraid of losing Emma. She noticed my silence and laughed, trying to make the moment less awkward. I finally told her that she looked beautiful. The words came out quietly, almost reluctantly, but her smile changed. It wasn't the playful smile from before. It was softer. She thanked me, then asked if I was coming to the fundraiser. I told her I hadn't been invited. She rolled her eyes and reminded me that she had invited me 3 times. I had forgotten. Or maybe I had pretended to forget because I didn't know what to do with the feelings that had been getting harder to hide. Still, I went. The fundraiser was held in an old restored theater filled with warm lights, paintings, music, and people dressed far better than I was. Emma disappeared into the crowd almost immediately, greeting coworkers and donors. I watched her from across the room, realizing how proud I was of her. Then a man approached her. He was confident, well-dressed, and clearly knew everyone there. They talked for several minutes. Emma laughed at something he said. I felt something ugly twist inside me. Jealousy. I hated it. I had no right to feel jealous. She wasn't mine. That sentence followed me all evening. Eventually, Emma found me standing near the entrance. She asked why I looked miserable. I told her I was fine. She knew I was lying. Instead of pushing, she simply stood beside me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly told me that the man I had been watching was the director of a foundation that might fund one of the art center's biggest projects. She had been nervous about the conversation all evening. I felt embarrassed. I admitted that I had been jealous. The moment the words escaped, I wanted to disappear. Emma stared at me. Then she asked why. I couldn't answer. Because the real answer was too frightening. I was jealous because I loved her. But love wasn't something I could say casually. Not after everything she had trusted me with. Not when our friendship was the safest thing either of us had. So I told her I didn't know. She nodded slowly. Then she said something I never forgot. She told me that sometimes people don't realize how much someone matters until they imagine life without them. That night, we walked home through quiet streets. Halfway there, Emma slipped on a wet patch of pavement. I caught her arm before she fell. She laughed nervously, and for a second we stood closer than we ever had before. Neither of us moved. Her eyes met mine. I could hear my heartbeat. Then she stepped back. Not because she didn't feel anything. Because she was scared too. The next few weeks became strangely complicated. We didn't fight. We didn't become cold. If anything, we became more careful. Every ordinary moment seemed suddenly important. Breakfast together. Grocery shopping. Sitting on the balcony after midnight. Even passing each other in the hallway felt different. Then Emma received an offer to move to another city. The art center had recommended her for a position at a larger organization. It was the opportunity she had dreamed about for years. I was happy for her. At least, I tried to be. But inside, I felt like someone had quietly started dismantling my home. She asked what I thought. I told her she should go. She asked whether I really believed that. I said yes. She looked disappointed. I didn't understand why until later. That night, I sat alone on the balcony and finally admitted the truth to myself. I had spent months protecting our friendship because I was afraid of losing her. But by refusing to tell her how I felt, I might lose her anyway. The next morning, I found her packing. Boxes were scattered across the living room. My heart sank. She had decided to take the job. I helped her pack without saying much. We folded clothes, wrapped dishes, and labeled boxes. Every object carried a memory. The blue mug we had bought together. The blanket from our first movie night. The tiny plant she had rescued from the trash outside the building. When the final box was sealed, Emma stood in the middle of the apartment and looked around. She asked if I was going to say anything. I didn't know what she meant. She smiled sadly and told me that I had always been brave for everyone except myself. That broke something inside me. I finally told her everything. I told her that I loved her. That I had loved her longer than I wanted to admit. That the dress had not created those feelings. It had only made them impossible to ignore. I told her I wasn't asking her to give up her opportunity. I wasn't asking her to choose me over her dreams. I just couldn't let her leave without knowing the truth. She listened silently. Then tears filled her eyes. She admitted that she had been waiting for me to say it. The teasing question about the dress suddenly made sense. The long looks. The quiet dinners. The way she always found excuses to sit beside me. The way she had asked whether I was coming to the fundraiser. None of it had been accidental. She had been afraid too. Emma eventually took the job. But she didn't move out immediately. For the next few months, we tried something new. We stopped pretending that we were simply roommates. We became two people learning how to love each other without becoming the entire world for one another. She moved to the new city. I visited. We called every night. We argued sometimes. We missed each other. But we grew. A year later, Emma came back for a weekend. She walked through the apartment carrying a small suitcase and wearing a familiar smile. Then she disappeared into her room. A few minutes later, she stepped into the hallway wearing that same blue dress. I laughed. She asked how it looked. This time, I didn't stare too long. I walked toward her, took her hand, and told her that after everything we'd been through, she still looked like the answer to a question I had been too afraid to ask. She smiled and leaned against my shoulder. The apartment was still the same. The old balcony. The scratched kitchen table. The little plant that had somehow survived. But we were different. We had learned that love isn't always a lightning strike. Sometimes it's the person who remembers how you take your coffee. Sometimes it's the quiet presence beside you when life becomes difficult. Sometimes it's the person you keep calling your roommate because you're terrified that saying anything more might change everything. And sometimes, changing everything is exactly what saves you. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you stories about kindness, hope, and unexpected love. And before you go, comment, "I believe in second chances," if you think the people who truly belong in our lives are sometimes the ones standing beside us long before we realize what they mean. Because sometimes the greatest love story doesn't begin with a stranger walking into your life. Sometimes it begins with the person already sitting across from you at the kitchen table. Sometimes it begins with a question as simple as, "How does this dress look?" And sometimes, if you're brave enough to finally look honestly at the person standing in front of you, you realize you weren't staring at a dress at all. You were looking at home.